Welcome back to another Gear Talk video with Method of Escape. Today I want to talk to you about this guitar. It's a 2005 Gibson Lucille, which has become my main gigging guitar for about a year now. So I've been meaning to make a video talking about this guitar for a while, but I just haven't had a chance yet. However, I've been playing some Motley Crue songs and putting this Floyd Rose FRX unit through its paces. And so I figured now might be a good time to sit down and talk about this as well. First, I'll go through this model and its specs. As I mentioned, this is a 2005 Gibson Lucille. For those who don't know, which I assume is not very many of you, Lucille was the name that B.B. King christened all of his main guitars that he played. Though the original Lucille in the 40s was actually like an archtop acoustic guitar, but over the years, B.B. King adopted the Gibson ES model as his main guitar, going through different variations of them. So in 1980, Gibson reached out to B.B. King to create a signature model. And at the time, he was playing a ES 355, which the Lucille is based off of. So what is a 355? I'll go through a quick rundown of the Gibson ES models. Firstly, the ES stands for Electric Spanish, and that was to differentiate from the lap steel Hawaiian style guitars to the Spanish or classical guitars of the time. So the ES line was actually introduced back in, I think, the 40s. The ES line that we know is the ES 300 model line, was three main ones, or at least three most ubiquitous ones. So the 335, it was named after the price of that guitar at the time, which is $335. Put into today's inflation calculator would be probably the same price as you would get one new now, which is about $3,000 or so. The idea of the 335 was to marry the old archtop, big body jazz boxes with the sort of new at the time solid body Les Paul. Ted McCarty came up with the idea to create a double cut guitar shape made of a maple poplar maple 3-ply laminate front, back, and sides, and glue them together with a solid maple center block running the length of the guitar, and spruce bracing to connect the arched maple laminates to that solid maple block. Traditionally, you had a set neck, mahogany neck, one piece, and either rosewood or ebony fretboard. It was a really innovative design, and it really kind of did what I think Ted McCarty was trying to do, because it took sort of the brightness, the directness, compression, and control of feedback that the Les Paul had, and married it with that breathiness, that woodiness, and warmth of a big jazz box guitar. As we all know, it turned out to be a great design, and players adopted it, and now it's found in every corner of the music world, and is the weapon of choice of many serious guitarists for great reason. Although it's versatile and can be molded, it has a very distinct tone that really can't be emulated by anything else. So moving up the line, the 345 took what the 335 offered and elevated it, mostly with aesthetics. It added more bling. It also had a trem unit, either a Maestro Vibrola or a Bigsby B7, and it also was wired with a Veritone rotary switch, and some of them had stereo wiring, which I'll go into both of those aspects more in depth in a bit. So the 355 then took that 345 and pushed it even higher. The 355 is essentially the Les Paul custom of the ES line. So it had mother of pearl inlays, an ebony board, multi-ply binding on the body, the headstock, gold hardware. So going back to B.B. King's model, he took the 355 and spec'd it out with what he wanted. The most obvious thing really is the lack of F-holes. And he did that to mitigate feedback. Technically, the lack of F-holes does help in mitigating unwanted feedback, but what it also does is that the vibrations within the body doesn't project out the holes, and so the wood responds differently. It offers a bit more low end and body, and a bit more compression and directness than a traditional 335 style with F holes would give. And so that's kind of a cool distinct feature of a ES guitar without F holes. Also, without F holes, you have to cut out a cavity for a backplate so that you can work on electronics. And boy oh boy, is that much more appreciated than working on electronics through that darn F hole. Another spec that BB King asked for was to have a TP6 fine-tuning tailpiece. The TP6 tailpiece was invented in the late 70s by a guy named Ren Wall. His idea was that when jazz players would play a chordal passage, if intonation was a bit off, they can just reach down with their strumming hand and quickly fine-tune whatever string they needed to without going up to the peg head. Apparently, it was well received, and people adopted that. And at the time, it was sort of a new invention, and BB King asked for it. BB King also asked that it was wired with a Veritone switch and in stereo. With a stereo guitar, and with this particular model actually, there's two output jacks. And what you would do is that the top output jack is controls the bridge pickup, and the bottom one, if you connect two cables or a Y cable, controls the neck pickup. And what you would be able to do is that you would be able to control these two pickups independently. And the idea was that you'd be able to put these pickups to two different amp rigs or tonal chains, whatever. You were able to do wet dry stuff or gain stacking. Really great for tone tinkerers, or if you're really into kind of diving into, having stereo rigs or things like that. But as far as I know, I think most guitarists don't normally utilize the stereo wiring, at least on the guitar. They may have a stereo rig, but that's after the effects chain. So Gibson wisely wired this bottom jack with a shunt that if you only plug into the bottom jack, then it would operate as a traditional mono output guitar, or at least mostly. The Veritone is a divisive device. A lot of people claim that they can't find usable tones, and a lot of people claim that it's a tone suck that you can't fully bypass the wiring. However, I don't buy that, because I played many ES style guitars with the Veritone, and they don't sound worse than a regular guitar without a Veritone. So the Veritone switch is a notch filter that passes the guitar tone through several capacitors depending on which setting you have it, and each setting is there's a preset removal of the frequencies, or a specific set of frequencies on the EQ spectrum. So on position 1, you have it fully bypassed, so it's going through like a normal non-Veritone guitar, and as you move up the settings, then it slowly takes out different pockets of that EQ spectrum. Think of it as a very crude and primitive coil tap device. What I have been using it for is a sort of to simulate an electroacoustic sound. So I have a acoustic DI patch in my quad cortex, and whenever in a set, if we have an acoustic guitar solo, I can just tap down one tap and it will go to that patch, and I set the setting to usually setting 4 or position 4, and I have the pickups in the middle position, and it does make for a rather passable electroacoustic sound in a pinch. And beyond that though, like just even the past gig, there were a few parts where I just wanted a bit of a softer sound when I was playing a cocktail hour, so I put it on position 2, which cuts off a lot of the high frequencies in the EQ spectrum, and played more jazzy stuff. So it does really come in handy if you're open to using it. So I'll go through and demonstrate the different settings of this Veritone switch right now. So as you can see, the idea was to offer a wide tonal palette in one guitar, which despite the shortcomings of this primitive device, it really does give you a wider tonal palette. And as I mentioned, I have learned to use it pretty extensively, to the point where if I'm looking to buy an ES guitar, I'm kind of trying to find one with a Veritone already installed. So those were the main aberrations from a traditional Gibson ES model that BB specifically asked for. But a few other differences is that at that time, Gibson was owned by the Norlin Corporation, and Norlin put into place a lot of cost-saving measures. One was that they started using a laminate 3-piece maple neck as opposed to a 1-piece mahogany neck, and it does affect the response and attack of the guitar. However, I personally like that. I love maple as a tone wood. I think maple offers a brighter and very dry and direct attack. The nuances of the overtones, it doesn't get absorbed by maple, so it is laid bare for you to hear. I also like how it seems to cut through the mix just a bit easier than like a mahogany guitar. So for me, a full maple bodied guitar like the Lucille is more a benefit than it is a detriment. Now, a downside to the maple neck is that maple is a denser wood, which contributes to its tonal characteristics, but it's also then heavier than most mahogany. So the maple neck coupled with a solid maple center block can make for a pretty heavy guitar. So that's the history of the Lucille model. Now I want to talk about what I've done to this particular one that I have. Obviously, I put on a Floyd Rose FRX trem system, which I talked about in a previous video with my SG Custom. But the Floyd Rose FRX system is a surface mount Floyd Rose system that ideally you can mount on any stop bar tailpiece guitars by using the existing bushings to screw in these studs, which this device mounts on. You can do it without any modifications to the guitar, so there's no routing. The only permanent modification is you have to screw on the locking mechanism behind the nut. I really do think it's sort of the best of what we have at this moment. To find something that gives you the range of a Floyd Rose, or at least close to it, without routing, big chunk out of the body. I don't think there's anything else in the market right now that does quite the same. Now, after saying that, because of the neck angle of this model and the carved top, I did actually have to route out about a half of an inch T-shaped channel underneath here so that the cradle of the spring here could rest, so that I can get the action to what I wanted it to be. Because of that, it's no longer reversible. However, that was a very quick, like 15-20 minute route job that I did in my living room, as opposed to taking it out to a luthier and waiting weeks for it to come back. Another modification I did was that I replaced the stock 490R and 490T pickup with Seymour Duncan Saturday Night Specials. So the Saturday Night Specials are supposed to emulate the Gibson T-tops from the 70s. They're very clear and articulate and kind of bright pickups with just a bit more fire in them. The neck pickup was voiced to be much brighter to combat the inherent wooliness of a neck pickup position, humbucker, and the bridge pickup was then voiced to have more mid-range presence and more shaved high end to then combat the ice pickiness of a bridge pickup position. I think it's a good halfway point between like a PAF style and like a super hot compressed modern humbucker. It's not my favorite sounding Seymour Duncan pickups. I actually had these on my Les Paul Custom Access for several years. Never really got into it, but it was a good all-around, all-purpose pickup set. I do like it in the semi-hollow body a lot more. There's more of a 3D presence to it, and it's not as soulless as I found it in the Les Paul. I also replaced the volume pots are now 500K volume pots as opposed to 300K pots, and I put in push-pull tone pots so that I can coil split these pickups. So with the coil split capabilities and the Veritone switch, as you can imagine, I mean, your palette is nearly infinite now. So I bought this guitar used, and the previous owner this must have been his main guitar, because it's worn and there's like deep gashes and cuts and scratches and, you know, checking here and there, and the finish, it's like it's gassed out or something. It's like a weird thing going on in the neck, but it's honestly kind of glorious. You know, it feels like an old pair of shoes. It's really kind of cool. Also, the owner replaced the stock Grover tuners with these lightweight Spurzzo locking tuners, which looks really nice, and it makes restrings nice and quick now. I also put in a tusk nut, as I do whenever I have a trem system, to help facilitate with the Floyd, because the locking mechanism is behind the nut. So my history with the Gibson Lucille started a few years ago. I had a ES335, a traditional from 2018, for several years, and boy, I never jived with it. It was one of those guitars where I just couldn't, whatever I did, I just couldn't get into it. I was interested in the Lucille because of how gorgeous it looked, and how at the time it was pretty affordable. I mean, we were talking about $2,000 for a mint condition Lucille, which is kind of insane. Just knowing what the guitar really is, which is a 355. So I took the plunge and I sold the 335 and got a gorgeous 1998 Lucille in cherry red. It played so well. It played closer to my Les Paul Customs than any sort of ES guitar that I played at that time did. And I think it had something to do with the neck angle and maybe the ebony board. It was sort of a great segue into the hollow body world that I never knew that I needed. However, sadly, well, I can't say sadly, in a way happily, I found the ES guitar of my dreams, which I'll devote an entire video to later on. But I found that, so I had to fund that by selling the Lucille. I always thought fondly of the Lucille, and I was adamant that I'd find a way to get another one in the future. So fast forward a few years, I wanted to find an ES355 to mod out and make into a counterpart to my Les Paul Custom Access. The Les Paul Custom Access was my main guitar for a few years in the past, and I started playing a 64 SG reissue, which I really liked and still do. And so I decided to make a SG counterpart to that. So I bought an SG Custom and put a Floyd Rose on and modded it out to be like the Les Paul Custom as much as I could. And I made a video of that as well. It was time where I thought, okay, well, let's finish off this Access collection by making, you know, a ES 355 Access. But however, you know, the 355, as you may know, it's like $5K up to $7 to $8K. So at the time I was thinking, man, to spend all that much money and to mod it out where I probably have to route and cut into the wood, it was not a very palatable thought. So I remembered immediately after the Lucille. The Lucille, as I mentioned, is for all intents and purposes a 355 at a very discounted cost. And after doing all my stuff to it, it really kind of became the most versatile guitar out of all of my guitars. The biggest thing, though, is that I mentioned the ES style guitars offers a very moldable tone, so that it's super versatile. However, it's incredibly distinct. So after getting used to that and how that sound sat in the mix, it's hard to deviate back. Now the neck profile on this is quite interesting because it's kind of a gigantic neck, but it's super flat in the back. At first grab, it's kind of unsettling and kind of off-putting, but because of how flat the back is, you stop thinking about it as soon as you play it. Best way I can describe it is it's a very, very wide D shape. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of a classical guitar neck. And so it kind of inspires me to play it just a little bit differently, which is not a detriment, but it's also not necessarily a benefit. So although it's become my main gigging guitar at the present moment, I'm actually looking to upgrade it to the modern Lucille, which is called a Lucille Legacy. The biggest thing is that it's a lightweight maple center block and a lightweight one-piece mahogany neck. Now, because of how frequently I gig and how long my sets are, the guitar's weight has been more important to me than it has been in the past, and I will gravitate towards lighter guitars. Another reason why I would want to upgrade to the Legacy model is that it's wired to be a mono baritone. So even with the shunted bottom jack, the interplay between pickups aren't 100% the same as a mono output guitar. And so when you're kind of having different volume values, it doesn't react the same way. It's kind of annoying. So the Lucille Legacy, with all its benefits, I think would be a really good step up from this model here. So once again, I appreciate you all tuning in and sticking around and watching me ramble on about my guitars. This is currently my favorite guitar to play. I did set up the Floyd Rose saddles to be super, super flat, and so the action is the lowest I've ever gotten in any of my guitars, without any buzzing too, because I had my luthier friend dress the frets. So it's a great guitar, and I really can't wait to see how the Legacy model turns out to be. You know, if I get a chance to pick one up. If you will, please do subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and ring that bell. It's really helpful in me trying to build this channel up. And the more I get, hopefully the more I can make videos. I hope to see you next time on the next Gear Talk video. Until then, keep playing your guitar and take it easy and rock on. Hey!